Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Canada Today Youth Edition. This is your brother, Mohammed Maxwell Hassan, here with an action-packed episode with you today. Now, we're living in a digital world. Everyone is online. A lot of people are, trying to be on the internet. And you can imagine, especially with this whole pandemic, it just really magnified that. However, when it comes to the online world, sometimes you got to be really careful. Unfortunately, you want to paint a rosy picture and that everyone is all safe and good to go. Unfortunately, there are people that take advantage of folks online. So here, the best defense is offense. So if we're able to really be proactive in educating ourselves on what is best to kind of stay safe online, then we're going to be in good shape, inshallah. And so with us here today, we got a very special guest here to tackle and crack this topic about staying safe in an online world is Brother Abdul Basit. MashaAllah, he works as a senior cybersecurity analyst in Toronto, focusing on the blue team. And coincidentally, got the blue right here. For those of you who are not aware of what he does, he recommends watching the movie Mr. Robot to catch a glimpse, but P.S., he is a good person. So if you have an idea of that movie, this is what it is. In his free time, he enjoys cooking, eating, playing video games, watching the NBA, and playing basketball. Abdul Bas likes to be updated with current global affairs and enjoys engaging in healthy debates. There's no debate here, but again, Abdul Bas, mashallah, wonderful having you here. And fun fact for everyone here, we grew up in high school together, mashallah. So it's good to have a familiar face, and it's really wonderful to see how our, paths kind of where it took us. So Jazakallah khairan, Abdul Basit, really, really crucial topic, especially in this day and age. Now, as a starting point, I'm always curious to know, and for our viewers here, it's always a good idea to kind of get people involved with storytelling. In a nutshell, could you kindly share with us, how did you get involved in the whole world with cyber security? I mean, even when I was growing up, I don't think that even terminology even came across your mind or like things of that nature. So just in a nutshell, why did you get into cybersecurity? And we'll take it from there.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you, Mohammed, for having me on your show. So pretty much in high school, my options were, when I wanted to graduate, I was always interested in computers and technology. And a lot of the options available right there would be going with computer science, maybe building programs, or going into computer engineering, which is hardware. And at a young age, I wasn't really sure what I really wanted to do. All I knew I wanted to do was to go in computers. So I consulted my uncle, who was into the field of computer science, and he recommended to me, it's like, hey, it's a really cool field that's just popping up. It's really, really exciting. There's a job shortage out there, and there's people are really looking forward to it. So he recommended I look into it. And lo and behold, when it came time for applying for university or post-secondary education, I saw a couple of programs at the undergraduate level, which focused on cybersecurity. So that was pretty much my segue into cybersecurity itself. Yeah, as you mentioned, it wasn't something that I was aware about, but it's a really, really interesting field. It does build up on computer science. So that's the way I got into cybersecurity initially.
So mashallah, man, it's funny how maybe back then it wasn't, I guess you said it was your uncle, yeah, like who really saw ahead of the trend, he saw the curve, he saw where things were going. Mashallah, good call in terms of how the online world just kind of really just turned into something really large. And here you are, and here we are right now. So there we go. You just kind of fell into it. How are you enjoying it? Is it riveting? You know how sometimes, and I don't mean to knock on accountants, but it's almost like, when people are trying to crunch the numbers, some people you get one or two reactions with that. It's like, oh, or, yeah, I really get stoked with it. Is cybersecurity the same? Like, is it something that you really relish, or is it something that for you just kind of go another day at the office kind of approach?
No, absolutely. Good question. I think it's a bit of both. It's normally what tends to happen is that a lot of times it's not as exciting as you would like it to be. In the movies, people are hacking away. Every day is not like that. But however, we as cybersecurity analysts, we have information, or we have access to a lot of information. So like a lot of times we're looking at data from all over the world. So and you may not know what you find around that time. So it's a really, really exciting field as well. Some of the things we do is like, hey, we are really up to date with the current global affairs, what's happening in the world, how people, what's the current security landscape. And based on that, we would have to kind of be proactive, right? So, for example, if we see something that's a company being targeted in the wild, then therefore now it's on us to kind of make sure that, hey, like, what's happening within our environment, what are we doing to protect it. So we do a lot of that. So it's really reactive, and we are really proactive as well. There are some cases, of course, that you have to kind of sit back and do the number crunching, but overall it's a really, really exciting field.
Masha, man, good to hear that. So I guess Hollywood maybe portrays it as a super duper, thing, but it is what it is. It's a real life. This is a real life situation. I guess maybe people don't think about it as much. They kind of mind their own business, go on Facebook, YouTube, the usual social media and for them it's like whatever, another day. But people actually could get have their identity or have some security that's breached. So that I think is a good segue into maybe based on your experience and based on the knowledge that you have, what are some trends that you've noticed in terms of how people use the online world? Is there anything in particular that you could speak to? I mean, are there maybe common pockets or areas that you feel that is higher risk of online, or do people care about their safety? I mean, what do you make of all, like, are there any general patterns or trends that you've noticed that you can zero in on?
Yeah, no, of course. I think, as you mentioned, that in living in a digital world, I think a lot of times we are really not aware of all the information that we share to the public. For example, like people will upload all their information on Facebook. It's like, hey, I live here, I attended this school, I have this job, and similarly, like having information on LinkedIn as well. To us, as this is some information that you may not realize is the actual meaning behind it. It may not mean as much to you because you're sharing personal information, but in the digital world, yeah, for sure, like that could kind of be used against you in a sense, right? People can build a digital profile of the type of person you are, what you do, where you live, where you went to school, and stuff like that. They can kind of profile you in a sense. So I think right now people are really sharing a lot more information than they really should. That's what I see, and that information could somehow be used against them. Typically, in the scenarios where, for example, you might be going to get a job, right? A lot of times, your employers can actually check your digital profile, what you like, what you do on your free time, so they can compare that to what they see on your resume and see whether it actually makes sense. So it really does affect you. It affects your education. It affects your job employment and stuff like that as well. And currently, as you know, like because of the whole the pandemic, people are working from home. So the landscape has slightly changed a little bit. People are still working at their job, but they're working through home, and that increases the risk. From what we see, is because people are now probably using their personal devices. They may not be communicating, or they're not locked down to using their corporate network. So there could be a lot of threats that they can kind of be around, right, or be targeted with, since they're working from home, because there are not as many protection mechanisms while working from home versus working in the office.
Yikes, man! I don't know what to say. It paints a pretty bleak picture, but that's good to dive into this like a little bit more. We have to go into things with eyes open and not just kind of turn a blind eye to these things. So okay, let's unpack this a bit more. Suppose, let's say Facebook. You use the example of employment. Somebody's sharing, hey, I live in so and so, such and such address, or this, that, and the other. Can you give an example, like a real life example or something? Maybe keep them anonymous if that's the case. But could you really paint a picture of how oversharing can really lead to disastrous results? Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think some of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of times I think it's not the information that you probably share, it's in terms of just employment about where you live or what you do. It's the type of the way you communicate, right? What kind of content you share. A lot of times, we share stuff. We like pages on Facebook. We share links on Facebook and stuff like that as well. So that way, an employer could figure out, okay, well, the type of person this person is. So, for example, in a really bad scenario, you might, if you portray yourself as a really good person on your resume, it's like, hey, I have all the skills and stuff like that. But meanwhile, on Facebook, on a social media platform, you might be sharing hate speech or anything that's really hateful, negative, or in a sense condescending. That could really mitigate the chances of you getting a job. So so because of that, you have to be really conscious about what you're sharing, how that information could be used against you. Because maybe, for example, maybe you have a certain ideology and it may not align with your employer, right? Maybe you're a good person, but the person hiring you might think the other way. So there might be conflict of interest. So stuff like that could arise easily when you're looking at that, when you're sharing too much information. So that's just in terms of just employment. Obviously, sharing your information on Facebook is a lot more than that. It can go outside of just employment. It can go into your personal life as well.
Yikes, man. Yeah, I know. So I hear what you're saying. Sometimes people, it's almost like the online world is an extension of who you are in the real world. So yeah, I hear you loud and clear. Sports is a classic example. You mentioned you like the NBA. So let's just say if your close friends, they are anti, I don't know, such and such team, and then here you are rooting them on, or you're just, sharing it. It really could. That's a simple example, but I think the sentiment is the same, right? Fair enough. Now, could you walk us through maybe some common mistakes people make? I know we talked about oversharing and things of that nature. Is there anything in particular, maybe in terms of passwords, maybe in terms of, is there any sort of online activity that the regular average folk do that if you're like, whoa, you know what, you should stop doing this, or this is actually pretty bad, or you know what I mean, like in terms of increasing the likelihood of being attacked by with cyber attacks? Are there any kind of common activities that you notice that we could use to that we haven't noticed, and what we could do to improve?
Yeah, for sure. Some of the things I would definitely recommend is, for example, nothing is truly free on the internet, right? Like a lot of us really like to download that free song, that free program, that free video game, and because maybe we don't want to buy it. But then that same software could be dangerous once downloaded onto your computer, right? So, for example, if I want the newest video game that's out there and I don't want to pay for it, and I pirate it from a website, sure, like that game would run, but you essentially don't know what else is packed on with that game as well. So it could be malicious software, what we call malware, which could be loaded with the game, and in the background, it could be doing a lot of things that you will never know about. And that's the really scary part, is that the average user may think that a lot of the signs of a computer being infected is like this visual, like things are popping everywhere, colors are flashing, things are disappearing here and there, but it's not really that. A lot of stuff is done in the background without the user's knowledge, and some of these things could be as much as maybe reading your communication. So you might be communicating outside to some people, maybe reading your email, trying to guess your passwords. People typically tend to like have shared password. They might have the same password for multiple different services. So they will read that, see if they can access anything, read your keystroke, for example. If you're typing something, they might be able to read exactly what you're typing. Similarly, they might have access to your camera as well. You might be doing something and you may not be aware that someone can be watching you, right? A lot of times right now we have like an LED on the camera that tells us it's on, but necessarily that could be turned off as well. So people can bypass all these mechanisms, and you wouldn't even know about it.
Whoa. Oh man. I'm going to sidestep the conversation for a second here, because I'm trying to put myself in the mind of someone who's who's actively trying to, you know, take people's personal information and just wreaking havoc. And like what motivates people to just go beyond the like just to go above and beyond and simply ruin people's lives? I mean, like, you know, when it comes to identity and this, that, and the other, is it just like when they're committing online crimes, like what's the thing that you've if you've, you know, the things that you've come across, what are some of the key motivators or things of that nature? Is it just, you know, is there anything that you can point to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It could be varies from the motives can vary, right? Could be financial motives. For example, at the end of the day, a lot of times these hackers or the bad actors are trying to make money, and to do that is for them to actually gain access to illegitimate information or something like maybe your bank account or maybe information that they can use in a certain way to make money. So that could be one of the factors of why some of these attacks are so prevalent. The other things could be like more political purposes, right? Maybe country X does not like country Y, right? And because of other for international political and global affairs as well. It's like, okay, we're going to go target people in country X, or because we don't have the same political mindset, political ideology. We don't share the political ideology with them as well. So there are multiple different reasons behind that as well.
Yikes. All right, Abdulbasa, you there? You okay? Yeah, okay. I'm just making sure. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I hear you, man. So I guess everyone to each their own. I mean, it's sad because, you know, Spawn, during the pandemic, I don't know, you've probably heard more than your fair share of folks that are, especially when it came to, and I'm sure it varies from country to country, but there was these like relief, you know, where the government issues relief, and some people they just kind of portray themselves at that, and at the same time they just kind of use it to take advantage, or phishing scams or fish. Could you educate us a little bit more about that, like phishing? What are some things to watch out for when it comes to, you just won this, or you're the 999th visitor on our website, or, you know, what are some examples of phishing scams that you see? Are there a text, email, even like calls? Like, what would you say? Are there anything that we could be to be alert for?
You know, absolutely. Again, as I mentioned, like when someone has phishing is usually like a spread type of attack where you're targeting like the greater audience, right? It's just like you're throwing a net in the water and hopefully you catch one or two fish. So that's the reason why phishing is not really more of a targeted attack. It's not looking at what you like and stuff like that. It's just a general attack that hopefully it will catch one or two people out of many millions of people that the phishing email goes to. So a lot of things we see when it comes to phishing is, hey, we have this like right now for COVID. What we saw was people were using actually COVID as an example of saying, giving you more information about the vaccine, right? People right now, as because of the whole pandemic, we were figuring out like what's the situation, what's going to happen with the vaccination, what are the current the rate of infection within our province or country. So which is relevant to a lot of people across the world. So people, the bad guys would send phishing emails, right, to these people, or and then they would, because they're so relevant to them, they would click it. And the purpose of the phishing email is just typically it's pretty much to lure someone to enter their credentials, right? A lot of times what we see is that attacks are not really super complicated. The initial gateway of conducting an attack is trying to gain access, right? People can have a secure password, but and you can try guessing it, but the easiest way is to send them a phishing link and they can just enter their password and there you have it. So you don't have to do much work. So a lot of times, yeah, like phishing attacks are just general attacks. You probably heard of those Nigerian scams, like, hey, I have $1 million, I want to put it into your bank account. So those are some of the older tactics that people use, but right now the phishings are getting a little bit more relatable, right? Based on something that you're interested in. Maybe the new Xbox came out, or the PlayStation came out, and you're like, hey, cool, I have a chance to win this new PlayStation and all that I always wanted. So you might be more reluctant to click that link and have a chance to win a PlayStation, right? So.
And as soon as you said the word PlayStation, I'm remembering what's it called? There's these, they call them scalpers. I think you're familiar with that. Like, yeah, man, people, they just quickly buy all the PlayStations out and they sell them at a price. Man, that's just, I don't know what to say. But yeah, man, I guess just keeping, it's just, maybe could you also walk us through, I know you talked about monetary means, like that's one way where people who are hacking, you know, and people that are, they're motivated a lot of times because maybe they're in dire need and they just, oh, instead of actually working hard, instead of actually, you know, putting in good, honest effort into getting a legitimate business, oh, the quickest way is to just rob someone's bank account or rob, God help us all, only lost oneself full of justice. The idea is, I mean, what leads people to click on those links? You mentioned like the phishing is like you're casting a wide net and you're hoping people will bite. Why are those one or two people that bite? Why do they bite, in your opinion?
It's just this is general awareness, right? We call it we have a term that we use. It's just like being cyber aware. And then employee training. So a lot of times those attacks are typically targeted towards people who may not be tech savvy. You have to realize that a lot of people, they predate the computers that they're currently using, right? All the smart devices that we're currently using. These type of technologies were not around when they were growing up. So the older people are more reluctant to fall for these tactics or these tactics because they don't understand how phishing really truly works. They don't have a full knowledge of how like all the scams that can happen over the internet. So the pretty much the intent of those type of attacks are targeting the people who are the most vulnerable, right? The younger people who have maybe because of the fact that they probably want free things, you can target them, or the older people, they don't really understand that something is illegitimate. Is actually harmful to them, and they may be more reluctant to click it, right? For example, if I send them a link to a bank account they use, disguised like a phishing link disguised as their bank account they use, they'll be like, oh, cool. They probably don't know the difference between, hey, is this coming from my real bank account or not? So the target audience there is people who may not be tech savvy or cyber aware. So I think that's one of the issues, or one of the things that why people fall for some of these phishing attacks and stuff like that.
Right, I hear you loud and clear. Yeah, when it comes to lack of awareness in general, I hear you. So now, if I can ask you then, what would you say, in your humble opinion, is there would a nationwide campaign do the trick? Like, what would you say? You know, people are always asking about awareness of so many different things. You know, there's so many issues that everybody says we all need awareness of. How do you become tech savvy and aware, and in a world that's oversaturated? What would you say are some examples of things that are really effective that gets people to really understand the difference between a phishing scam versus something legitimate versus malware versus what have you? What would you say? Like, what would be? Imagine if Abdul said you have the keys to the kingdom. You could do whatever you want. Like you have the ability to raise as much awareness to the whole world as possible. What would you be I'm gonna put you on the spot here. What would you say would be your game plan or strategy to get that out there?
Again, because I think that a lot of people are like, the social media has a big prevalence as well, right? So that's one way to outreach people. I think as younger people, we are growing up with this technology, so I think it's the onus is really on us to educate those who may not be aware. You and I probably can differentiate between what's bad and what's good when it comes to like a phishing email, right? So I think, and it may not be true for someone else. So it really comes to us to kind of make sure that people around us, we can kind of guide them in terms of based on our experience that, hey, like, yeah, we should.
Yeah, the boss. What? Oh, the boss, you there? Okay. Not sure. He kind of timed out. Okay, just put it on me for now, just to make sure we're good to go. All right, okay, little technical difficulty there. You can see we're talking about cybersecurity, but the online world is definitely one that's sometimes unpredictable. Until he comes back, we'll make sure that we'll be having good to go. But to recap so far what we talked about and discussed, with cybersecurity, it's tough. It's tough for us to kind of get to be on our toes at all times. People, unfortunately, again, like I said it before, we want to paint this rosy world and making sure that everyone is in good shape and that everyone is out there for you. Unfortunately, no. There are some people who actively plan out things and they're targeting certain folks, and we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us all safe. However, having said that, the best defense is knowledge and awareness. So it's just like what Abdul Basit was mentioning here when it comes to this whole thing. Ishman, that one idea I really enjoyed, and I wanted to expand on it once inshallah we are able to have him back on, is that one of the interesting things is that he was talking about the whole, oh, mashallah, Abdul Basit, there you are. Okay, right before. Can I finish this point before you jump into it? Like, I love that point you mentioned when it comes to having the youth or the younger generation teach the older generation. The onus is on us to get through it. That's such an interesting, instead of addressing a worldwide campaign, specifically for the older generations who may not be aware of what a computer is or is worried about all these different things. They like have their youngsters teach them, their children or their great grandchildren. Very cool. So yeah, please go ahead. I hope inshallah we're gonna be smooth sailing from here, but go for it. Let's want to complete your thought.
No, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the ways we can kind of break it down instead of having a really global outreach. If you can talk about it with the people we're mostly around, and that way we can slowly start spreading and hopefully target the greater audience. We as young people are more technologically savvy, right? We have multiple different devices that we use, and I think the best way would be to kind of pass that information on to the people which are around us. Education and awareness is the best way for people to kind of to be aware of what's happening. So I think, that's the way. I don't think there's a really the best way to target everyone globally in one shot. But if you start targeting people or educating people which are around us, that way we can slowly have this domino effect that they can educate people around them as well, and that way we can start. If we start making it more focused, then we can kind of group that out, and hopefully that strategy works. So that's the way I would approach something like that.
So let's start this domino effect, man. Let's do it right here, right now. Let me ask you right on the spot. If there was one thing that you would pass on, let's just say with all your experience so far in cybersecurity, one thing that you would pass on to the average folk, what would it be that would tremendously help them out? Let's start this domino effect. What would be that one piece of advice?
Interesting. This is going to be a tough one because there could be several.
Go for it. Yeah, name them off. Go for it. Just do what you got to do.
No, absolutely. I just think that, I think that currently in the digital world, I think honestly, it's just that we share way too much information, right? I think something that we need to kind of limit the type of information we share. Social media is a platform where we can upload pictures and all this information about us, but that same information is also inherent to us, right? For example, whenever you are using your banking information, they'll ask you, hey, can you ask some secret questions? Can you answer some secret questions about yourself? So it's like, what's the name of your dog, right? And stuff like that. And you, as on social media profile, you can have maybe your dog is tagged as like, oh yeah, hey, blah blah blah. This is my name of the dog. So people can actually use that information against you, right? That same information could be out there, could be used in different ways. So your personal information, like your phone number, for example, could be done that way. So I think we should really, really figure out how we can limit sharing information in the public space, because I don't. To us, that information may not be as valuable. Like we may think that it's not a big deal that we share a picture or maybe make a post. But to the people out there, it's a lot more. They can use that to build a profile for you, right? Who you are, what you do, what you like, where you've been. So all that metadata can be used to build a profile of the type of person you are and the type of things you do.
Man, Marshall, you brought up a very good point. I'm just thinking out loud here, like, oh, it's going to be tough to convince people to limit I mean, the whole nature of Instagram and Facebook is to encourage people to share. People want to. I think I'm sure you've heard of like cases or, I mean, studies done about dopamine and this, that, and the other. You want to toss that in there, like as soon as you upload. Okay, for example, like graduation season is coming up for a lot of folks, right? I mean, in elementary schools, public schools, high schools, universities. I mean, what's the natural thing to do once you graduate? Do you just stash away the diploma and that's it? Like, oh, I accomplished this, or what do? You get that beautiful camera and you just get that $1 million shot and then blast it on social media. Everybody look, I graduated, right? It's hard to imagine, but I hear you loud and clear. So maybe, like, what would you say? Is there any? Maybe if we can't stop people from sharing stuff, how would you mitigate that? What would you say are some ways to reduce the chances of? I mean, if someone's going to be posting a picture of their graduation ceremony or their graduation, what would you say are some? Is there anything that you could recommend to really help? Share, but not overshare. Like, is there anything that you could suggest?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think a lot of these platforms, social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, where you're sharing your photos, you have an option to turn off public sharing, right? You can restrict your photo to your inner circle, and that way that information cannot be shared externally. A lot of times, our photos, sometimes we may not know the privacy settings around our photos, so that way, that photo could be visible anywhere. Our profiles are also visible everywhere. So a lot of these social media platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and stuff like that, they have the ability to limit the exposure, or people who can actually search you on the internet, right? They won't see any hits. So you should really, if you do like sharing those photos of your graduation, for example, maybe share it with your inner circle, right? I wouldn't see a need of sharing it with the greater world. I would want my friends and family to know that, hey, I graduated. So I would really make sure that the pictures I'm sharing are sent to an exclusive group of people. I think Facebook, or not Facebook, Instagram has a feature called close friends. So you can share those type of information to close friends. And Facebook, same thing as well. You have the ability to kind of restrict your profile, that anyone, if I search in your name online, I don't see your profile picture. I don't see the stuff you posted, because that thing's private. If you don't do that, maybe if your profile, for example, is public, then I can maybe search your name up on Google and I can find your profile. And I can see exactly the things you're posted, the pictures you've uploaded. Even though I'm not really connected with you, I could be anywhere in the world. So you should really tighten down those controls wherever possible to make sure that you can limit the information that's exposed to the internet.
So maybe that could be it. Maybe the domino effect could be knowing the privacy settings, like really understanding that. Like, how many times have people actually bothered to look into the privacy settings? Maybe not as much as they should, right? That's a good one. So like getting people aware and educated and understanding, hey, look, are you aware that you can turn off, let's say, the public setting, and you can restrict it to friends or close friends, or so that's a good one. That's a very useful tip, and that's very practical. I think a lot of people could benefit tremendously from that. Now, when it comes to, let's say, purchases, I think this is something else. We talked about social media. Let's say I'm gonna name drop here. Let's say Amazon, for instance. Hamza, it's reality. It's a reality for a lot of people. I mean, it's very tempting. I mean, the prices, the expedition, like the expedited shipping, and you just get it at your doorstep and all that jazz. It's very enticing to folks. Is there anything? I mean, it seems at first glance it's very innocent. You put in your address, your contact, your credit card information. Is there anything dangerous about this that you would caution? Or is there anything that you've seen, or is it something that, not as bad as other places, like in particular, let's say, social media platforms that are geared mainly for entertainment as opposed to buy and sell?
Yeah, no, for sure. Take Amazon, for example. There could be different sellers, right, on Amazon that exist. The product is not directly coming from Amazon. They have other sellers, third-party sellers, which have stores essentially on Amazon from which you're buying the product from. A lot of times, some of the things I've noticed is that for example, one of the scams I've seen on Amazon is that a new seller would create a new account on Amazon, and start selling stuff for way below market value. And as a consumer, when you look at a great deal, you're like, hey, wow, I want this new great pair of headphones, which retail for $50. This seller is selling it for $10, right? And then now you see people posting about it, and you see the reviews, and you see 5 stars everywhere. People are posting photos. You may not realize that might be a social engineering tactic. That's a tactic made by the seller to entice someone to kind of make a purchase on that product, right? The reviews could be faked, and then so what could happen is that, what are the dangers of that? For example, sometimes the information that you're sending, sometimes Amazon is processing your order on their payment system. So you may not be sending your credit card data, but in the past you may have, right? I'm not too sure when exactly that changed, maybe, but I believe that at some point you would actually send the payment card processing or that payment history was, or payment procedure or method, and data was available to the vendor. But now Amazon did limit that. But now you're wondering, okay, if Amazon does limit that, how is that any worse, right? But you have to realize that when you send something like that, you're sending your address. The shipper has to submit stuff to send something to you. So now they have your address, now they have your phone number, and what they can possibly do is they can build a profile, for example, right? They now realize you live in a particular city. This is your phone number. This is your email address. They can use that to maybe send you a phishing email on your email address, or maybe call you saying, hey, we have this thing with you. You're wanted by I don't know, like one of those scams where you're wanted by the Canadian government for not paying your taxes. So they can use some of these information to target you. So Amazon, although it's a platform where we think that, oh, it's super convenient and super easy to use, there are different people can definitely find a way to kind of abuse the system and get information or use it for nefarious purposes other than what it was intended for. And this is one of the examples I've actually seen and observed, where people would actually make up fake stores and sell items just so they can obtain information, which could be used in any ways, right? Could be used for phishing, could be used for any other purposes that the bad guys intended.
Yikes, man, it's fun. I guess if it's the same old adage is true, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. So if you see that pair of headphones that's for $10, it's not gonna go anywhere. Now, any resources that you could offer and point towards to help people with staying online, staying safe online, I mean. Is there any resources that you could look at and say, hey, this would be really helpful to get people to be more, on the stepping stone of education? Is there anything that you could point to?
Sure, no, for sure. I think you have to just be aware, right? I think just read news. I think news is really, really good. In terms of all the recent things that are happening, typically the pattern is the same. We look at really complicated attacks. A lot of things is like maybe outside of our scope of like how complicated they are. But a lot of these attacks are conducted through a really small means. For example, you might see like a system being shut down by ransomware. I don't know if you're aware, but recently there was a ransomware incident in the United States for the Colonial Pipeline, where the whole entire system was shut down because they had pretty much ransomware the entire infrastructure, and therefore it caused an outage, right? And you may think that's super complicated, right? Like how were they able to do that? And it turns out, if you read the news, the reason how they got in was an old password, right? And a password for an ex-employee. So apparently this employee did not work for Colonial Pipeline in the past, or hasn't worked in the Colonial Pipeline. However, his account was still active. And what they discovered was that in the dark webs that he had used a similar password somewhere else. So someone realized that, okay, well, this person works here. Let me try a password that they used in the past. And lo and behold, they had access to the environment, and then they can go in and do that. So some of the resources like the recurring patterns here is just that, hey, just make sure that you have a strong password, right? Don't click on any suspicious link or emails. Don't open any suspicious attachments. Don't download any software that you really don't know. Some of the resources could be within like news that you read, or maybe on YouTube. I know a lot of people like to watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. There's really good programs out there or channels out there which promote good cyber hygiene. So I think some of these things that we could do, and can really apply to ourselves, would be, yeah, making sure that our passwords are long and complicated, like not super complicated, of course, but long enough that it takes a long time for a person to kind of crack it. And then use different password across different services. A lot of times we're people of habit, right? We may have multiple different services. I might have a Hotmail account, a Gmail account, and Yahoo account. And as a human being, for convenience purposes, I might have the same password across, right? But that one password now can give an attacker access to multiple different services, right? So I think some of the things we can do is just make sure is that we're really aware of what's really happening. A lot of these things are not really complicated. You're just going to make sure that if something looks too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Just make sure that, again, some of the things we do is long passwords. Don't click on any suspicious links. Don't download anything suspicious. Make sure you don't download anything like a PDF file, any Excel file into emails, and just make sure that like something that we always like to do. We have our smartphone walking around with us, and a lot of times, you know what, we might not have data, so we might connect to like a public Wi-Fi, for example. There are dangers to that as well, right? So just making sure that, you know what, there are times that people can view what we're doing. So having being aware of some of these things through means of reading newspaper, watching YouTube videos, reading articles online can really, really help educate the users and making sure that they're protected and against these really small threats.
MashaAllah, man, dropping gems left and right. Do you have any YouTube channels that you could point to as well? Like specifically if someone wants to search up anyone that's really helped you out tremendously in your whole cybersecurity journey?
Absolutely. So these might be a little bit high level, but there's a group called SANS Institute. So they have a really good channel on YouTube which talks about the discipline of security, kind of brings in different professional people from different professions who talk about what they do in cybersecurity. So so you can look up SANS, SANS, on YouTube, and they'll give you different videos about the type of the basic complexity of an attack to like a really complex type of attack. And then there's other channels, like people actually do like exercises as well. I watch a channel called Black Hills Security, and these people kind of are they are a lot more complicated and technical, but you can get the basic idea of the type of things that they're trying to do, right? Some of the basic attacks they do is like, hey, like they get hired for engagement purposes, and they will pretty much go to the customer's environment and try to break in as a good guy, right? And some of the techniques they use is like, hey, social engineering. They'll go on LinkedIn, look at the people's profile, get their information, get their phone number, and maybe try to find a way to social engineer them. So these are some of the tactics which can be really applied to your personal life as well if they're not really complicated, that you can kind of like catch from some of these videos.
MashaAllah, all right, there you go. So for those who really want to, sink their teeth into the whole cybersecurity world, they said SANS, SANS, and what was it, Black Hills
Security.
Black Hills Security, there you go. So that's for the viewers as well to check it out if you just to satisfy that curiosity, and for those who really want to, maybe cybersecurity is for you. You never know. I mean, it's here to stay, and unfortunately, there's no shortage of people like bad guys, so to speak. You mentioned you gotta have to chase after them, and you kind of have to, there's mashallah, of the bust. I think you're gonna be in. There's work for you forever, inshallah. May Allah accept it. Man, keep going, doing all the amazing things. Now, I hate to say it, but I always say it. Like in these shows, that all good things must come to an end. Man, phenomenal experience having you here, and learning, opening up a bit. Getting more aware and conscious, not just scrolling mindlessly and just going through the day-to-day. It's always good to take a step back and say, unfortunately, you see people on the news saying that, their identity's been identity theft, their bank account's been wiped clean, that, people are in danger. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. And it's a reality, but we got to prevent that, and the best way to do that is through education. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give you this final opportunity. If there was any golden piece of words of advice that you have for folks to really take their cybersecurity to the next level, just to really, maybe someone who isn't super tech savvy, someone they're looking at all the web and the code, and it's like, it's too much for me. But in this case, the average individual, I mean, I know you dropped gems here and there. If there was one final piece of golden advice that you would give for people to stay safe when they're online, what would that be?
I would say, and this is not a really like a direct things that they should do, but realize that the weakest chain in the cybersecurity is the human aspect, right? That's the one that gets exploited the most. A lot of times we think, again, like as I mentioned, people think it's really complicated, but really not. Users are easier to trick, whether that's phishing emails or doing anything related to that. So just making sure that if, as a person, like when you're checking your emails out, or you're receiving any phishing emails, or maybe getting any weird text messages saying that you need to do this, you need to do that, look back at yourself and figure out whether that's relevant to you, right? Is the link relevant to you? Is that text that you got relevant to you? If it's not relevant to you, you can safely ignore it. The whole point of this is to get your attention. So I would really recommend, it's just that making sure that you can just be aware of the surroundings, be aware of your social presence, and just make sure that, and just remember that, again, you are the weakest link when it comes to security. Because the human aspect, we're just really social creatures. We like to share a lot of information. So if you just limit the things you do in terms of just be hygienic in terms of cybersecurity, making sure that you don't overshare your information, I think it will go a long way to protect you on the internet and anywhere else.
Jazakallah khair, Abdul Basit. My man, that's it. Good old high school reunion right here. MashaAllah, Abdul Basit. Wonderful having this chat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and all the amazing work that you're doing, and as you're continuing to go through fighting through cybersecurity. My man, like, I hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all goes well. And again, thanks for raising our consciousness and level of awareness of surfing on the web in the best way possible. Now, I want to talk to the viewers for a quick second here about cybersecurity. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity and we're talking about the internet, there's just one golden rule that I personally like to live by, and as much as possible. We're not perfect, but as much as possible to live by this one principle. And that is, whatever you post, whatever you do, assume the whole world will know about it. Even if it's a private inbox, even if it's a private text message, even if it's something that you think you really go in and maximize all the privacy settings, always assume that the whole world will know whatever it is that you are going to write or post, because you never know. How many times have you seen scandals online, celebrities, people, they are just texting privately and boom, the screenshots are all over the place. And, we just pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are aware of what we say and what we do in the best way possible, not just in the real world, translate that into the online world as well. And this is a humble reminder for myself and for you all to stay safe online. MashaAllah, wonderful having you all here. Thanks for tuning in. Canada Today Youth Edition on Muslim Network TV. This is your brother Muhammad Maxwell Hassan. Tune in on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And stay strong, stay safe, and stay proud to be Muslims. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.